The expectations are set high for the 2025 Sun Devil football season. Can they live up to the hype? Plus, from the P. Diddy case to the Idaho murders, we're breaking down the most high-profile cases so far in 2025. And the battle for more seats in Congress have been taking place across the country. Could gerrymandering be an issue for upcoming elections? It's all that and more this evening on Broomhead. Welcome, I'm Mike Broomhead. Before we jump into today's interviews, let's take a look at some of the top headlines. Let's start with the tragic deaths of children and DCS and the spotlight on that organization. Rebecca Baptiste is a young girl who died after multiple reports were made about possible abuse by a school. It looks as if DCS let her fall through the cracks. We now know the brother of another victim has filed a claim against the state for about $60 million. But it raises the question of oversight. It's easy to go back and Monday morning quarterback some of these things, but is there really relevant questions that should be asked? Should there be people held accountable if there was DCS was at fault and they were negligent? Should individuals pay a heavy price? That's a question of, will they take it seriously if they are on the hook? Secondly, the Dragon Bravo fire at the Grand Canyon. Good news. Even though this fire has burned well over 150,000 acres, being one of the largest fires in Arizona history, progress is being made and 3 trails have been reopened at the Grand Canyon. That is fantastic news. Let me suggest to you that if you have an opportunity to go up and spend some money, go to the South Rim where everything has always been open, but go and frequent these businesses, go to these newly opened trails and spend some money there and give these businesses some cash that they need to survive, because that's where they make their money, is through tourism. And I also would say this is an example of why we should be doing proper forest management. Not just property, but some legendary buildings, some iconic places are gone forever. We've got to keep these places, thin the forest, and do it the right way. Coming up, after winning the Big 12 championship last year, how is the ASU football team going to continue the momentum, and will they be able to match their success? Find out when Broomhead returns. It's important to recognize and thank the fine Arizona men and women who are serving in our country's military. One of the ways we like to do that is through a segment called From Arizona for America, and it's brought to you by my good friends at Sanderson Ford. So join me in honoring Gunner's Mate Second Class Bryson Felix, a native of Phoenix, Arizona. He's assigned to the WASP-class amphibious assault ship USS Macon Island, stationed in the Pacific Ocean. For a list of more of our friends and neighbors that are from Arizona for America, go to the Broomhead tab at cw7az.com. Huge college football fan, and I don't know that I've been more excited for a college football season than I am this year. Joining us, Assistant Athletic Director, Player Development, DJ Foster, ASU alumni. How excited are you about this team?
I'm so excited. It's been quite a journey these last 2 years, and it's just so fun to be in the building and to see the stories unfold, to go from our first year, winning 3 games, to last year being the Big 12 champion. There's just so much joy and love and passion for football in this building, and it's just so fun to see all those things align together.
So let's talk about last season. You were picked to be dead last in the conference. You win the conference championship, and I don't think there's anybody that's even all the unbiased fans, that you should have won that bowl game. You guys were the team, and I'm not asking you to comment on that, but you were really a great team last year. How do you sum up last year?
Oh, I mean, every season is a story, and every game is a chapter. And I think, every game, win, loss, whatever it was, we learned and grew. We understood the pros, understood the cons, what we needed to take from each game. And I think that's how teams kind of develop and build throughout the season. You get that momentum by making those adjustments, those changes throughout the year. A lot of great storylines. I mean, obviously, Cam Scatterbull, a guy like Sam Levitt, who was just trying to earn the trust of his teammates, to earn the starting job, to being put on a national scale. I mean, our O-line, our defense, there's just so many pieces to the puzzle. And it was so fun to watch each one of these guys develop and mature throughout the year.
What is it like as an alumni that's played on that field to see a fan base and the stadium full and the student section lose their mind like they do? What's that like for you?
There was multiple times this year where, I had to hold back some tears just because of the love and joy that I see this community having for the school. And just to see the community engage, you saw the excitement, you saw the hunger you felt like they were wanting something like this. They were waiting for something like this. So it's just so fun, just to see the fans and the people that were still part of the ASU community that were rooting for me 15, 10 years ago. They're still here and they're still excited and they're still putting, their energy, their resources here just to provide something to this school. And it's just so fun to see the student section and all the community come out and enjoy what the products on the field.
When you talk about player development, what does it mean to you to work with a coach like Coach Dillingham, who came out publicly and said, I don't want to be number one in recruiting, I want to be number one in retention, and have 17 starters come back, including a quarterback that could have gone anywhere to a program and played anywhere and started? What does it mean to you for that? And talk about what that means to have them return.
Oh, it's honestly, it's so impressive. And I think that was what Coach Dillingham's goal was, is to establish a culture that's so strong. You know what? You can't see it, and I tell these guys all the time, there's a monetary value. There's a value in a community. There's a value in a team that you love and you enjoy, a coach that you enjoy playing for. Like, it may not be an exact dollar sign that you can see at the time, but I try to tell them and teach them that there is value in that. So it's just so fun for these young people, for me to see them understand that, and then for them to understand just how important it is to be a part of a team and community. And like you said, to return a lot of those guys that could have had a lot of options, but you see the passion and the care they have for this place. And I think that's why you see how passionate they play on game day, because it matters to them.
So now you've gone from being picked to be dead last in the conference and surprising the world and winning the conference to now being the only team in the conference in the top 20 preseason. What now happens with that target on your backs? Well, how does that affect the team, or doesn't it affect the team?
I think, it's keeping that underdog mindset. I think our guys still have a big chip on the shoulder. You look at, Sam and JT and a lot of our guys, they still are relatively young in college football. That was their first year of playing a full season. So you got guys that are still trying to prove themselves. We have guys on our team that were all conference last year that are still working their butt off, that still have a lot to prove. So I think understanding that we are circled on a lot of team schedule, and you're going to get the best game. You're going to get their best every single week. And I think, we train in our offseason that way. We've been going through training camp that way. Is the same work we put in last year. We have to double down. We gotta up the ante a little bit and continue to, understand that, mistakes, playing hard, doing the things that we do well. We got to do that tenfold this year.
DJ, it is so much fun to meet you and talk to you for a few moments, because I'm such a big college football fan, and I love the energy around ASU football right now, and I'm glad an alumni like you gets to be a part of it and enjoy it. I wish you the best this season, and I hope we can come back and do this again and talk about what a great season it was at the end.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, DJ. We'll be back. Coming up, 3 high-profile court cases have been a major focus in the news and on social media. We're taking a look at what you need to know for each case. That's next on Broomhead. People look at high-profile cases all the time, and we want answers on what happens and why they happen. So joining us is Bobby Tugavi, and you were a prosecutor in Orange County in California in some high-profile cases.
I was, Mike, and thanks for having me. I was a prosecutor for a little over 13 years in Orange County, California. Handled a lot of sex abuse or sexual assault cases, and the Golden State Killer case. I was the prosecutor for the Orange County murders.
So people are very curious, the Idaho murders that happened, killing college students and these young people, and then a plea agreement being given.
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
For the people that don't know the facts of that case, it was such a brutal murder, and yet they offered him a plea deal. What goes into the thought process of that happening, that they didn't take him to trial and get him the heaviest sentence they could?
That's a great question. So the plea deal ended up being 4 life sentences. And, as a prosecutor, you have to make a decision on several aspects, right? The first thing you look at is, do I have the evidence to be able to not just prove in a death penalty case that the person did what I'm saying they did, but also, is a death penalty the right sentence? And in this particular case, I know that there was some mitigating circumstances that he had some mental issues and some mental disorders and had some rough childhood trauma that a lot of times a jury will use to mitigate it. And even if they don't, you have to look at the next process, which is the appeal process. And the appeal process in a death penalty case always takes years and years and years. Most of the time ends up being a life sentence for the person anyways. So I think as a prosecutor, you have to kind of look and see, am I risking a true conviction by moving forward with the death penalty? And in this case, I know that it was really circumstantial in the way they tied it together, and there were some issues with the DNA, and the judge made some calls, the trial judge, that could have been appealed, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think it would have necessarily been overturned, but there was always that risk. So I think they take those into account, and ultimately they have to take the family of the victims into account to decide what they should do.
Well, there's a case here where there's a death warrant that was just signed for an October execution for a convicted criminal that was convicted in '96. It's almost 30 years, so I understand the time frame. So what goes into, let's talk about the Diddy case, because he was such a celebrity. What went into that? Were there mistakes that were made? How was all of that done? And it seemed like very little results.
Yeah, that's actually also a great question. So with the Diddy case, they really, where they try to bank, the U.S. attorneys try to bank, is on the RICO aspect of it, to try to say that it's an enterprise, that what Diddy was doing was this enterprise and this almost like a corporation, right? A corporation that's main business is to do these, sex trafficking and prostitution and so forth.
And what I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Absolutely.
The prostitution across state lines, I don't understand that aspect. Is that part of the RICO law? So they were trying to get on that?
So the RICO law says if it's an enterprise and this enterprise is doing certain criminal acts. So the prostitution, the moving people over state lines for prostitution was part of those underlying crimes for the RICO. But it's, the RICO was really designed for mafia and how to get the top guy as the CEO of the enterprise. And in the Diddy case, it was a very difficult road for them to have to climb to prove that it wasn't just these really perverted parties, but it was this criminal organization surrounded by that. And that's a heavy burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt for prosecutors.
And isn't it true, like with the OJ trial, I'm going way back, but isn't it true that the public sees so much all the time in the news, but the jury doesn't? The jury is intentionally isolated to just evidence. So what they're seeing isn't what we're seeing when they're basing their decision.
Yes, the courtroom is a sterile environment, and so the judge always has to make a decision on whether or not something is probative, and is it more probative than prejudicial, right? Because you don't want a lot of inflammatory things there that maybe aren't relevant, and it may be good for media and for us to see, and it's exciting to look at as far as the case, but it's not pertinent to whether or not this person committed these crimes.
So lastly, the Epstein files, big political, obviously very political. Can you explain why they would not want to release grand jury testimony or grand jury paperwork on that? What's the reasoning behind that?
So in general, both in state and federal courts, grand juries are notoriously secret. The proceedings are secret. The witnesses are instructed and ordered not to talk about their testimony. And a lot of times in these transcripts, you have victims, you have other potential investigations that are going on with potential targets. So there's a lot that goes on in grand jury transcript. And in a grand jury proceeding, there's no defense attorney. So it's only the prosecutor presenting things that, from their point of view, really, as to why they think that there should be an indictment. And based on that, there's a lot of stuff in there that could taint the public's view or cause safety for victims. And even now, I know that they just released, the DOJ just released all the Epstein files, or they're slowly releasing them to the Senate, to one of the Senate committees to review. But even then, they're still going to have to go to court and try to get it unsealed by the judge. So even if the Senate has it, they still won't be able to release it without a court's order.
So even in an overtly political case, probably better to err on the side of caution and not release information to the public that doesn't give a full picture.
Absolutely. I mean, there has to be a determination of the public interest in it, but there also has to be weighed against victim safety, ongoing investigations, and that's a fine line to walk for, and you should never do it for political purpose.
Appreciate the expertise.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Getting real answers on these things, not just the political spin that I'm guilty of sometimes like everybody else. We'll be back. Coming up, the battle for more seats in Congress has been making headlines. What's ahead for Texas and California, and could Arizona be a part of a redistricting battle in the future? Find out next. All right, big story out of California and Texas. What it started in Texas has to do with gerrymandering and redrawing district lines. Joining us is Tom Collins, Citizens Clean Election Commission. We got to talk about the gerrymandering for a moment.
Sure.
What happened in Texas, where the Texas legislature voting on redistricting and a new map, and the Democrats left the state. I mean, this has been a big mess.
Yeah.
California then saying, if that's what they're going to do, we're going to do it too.
Sure.
So we're going to get to whether or not it could happen here. But let's use this to show gerrymandering. Here we have a county,
Yeah.
predominantly blue.
Right.
And if you want to make this a red county,
Right.
you go like this. 5 in each.
Yeah.
But now you've got 2 red representatives
Right.
and only 1 blue
Right.
in a majority blue district.
Right.
Is that a good explanation of gerrymandering?
Yeah, that's exactly what people are talking about right now, both in Texas and California, is how do you, where the U.S. House is very tightly held, if you can get a marginal seat here or a marginal seat there or get 4 or 5 seats somewhere, by essentially assigning voters to a district by their party, yeah, that's what's going on.
The accusation from Texas is this is already going on, and their new map is going to correct that.
Right.
So depending on where you fall, but the question for Arizona is, could it happen here?
Well, so in Arizona, back in 2000, the voters put in the Arizona Constitution an independent redistricting commission. So what that body does is it draws lines for our congressional seats and our legislative seats, and it's got a less political charge, if you will, right? I mean, it is, first of all, it's an independent commission. It's selected by the legislative leadership, and then the members of the commission select their chair. But then they have a list of criteria that they look at that are designed to blunt the politics. For example, they're not allowed to look at where incumbents live, and to the extent possible, they're supposed to keep districts competitive, right? So that's
right.
where they're trying to get at this issue of partisan gerrymandering by directing the commissioners, hey, where you can, you've got to make sure that we're not doing a partisan gerrymandering.
Right. So in densely urban areas like we live here in the Valley,
Sure.
It seems to me it would be easier to draw those lines only because that's where so much of the population is.
Yeah.
But when you get up north and district where Eli Crane is, and and it's such a strange district where Gosar represents that goes all the way from the northwest corner to the southwest corner in Yuma.
Sure.
It's got to be more difficult to get the populace that you need to fill that district. Is that the big issue in those rural areas?
Yeah, that's a big part of it, right? So all of the districts have to be roughly equal population. And there's actually a lot of litigation around how much you can deviate from that question. But yeah, so when you get outside of into rural Arizona, you're having to fill those districts with the folks who are there. And you also have a real natural partisan breakdown in the state, right? So the southern part of the state, Santa Cruz County, is heavily Democratic. That's who lives there. Likewise, if you go up to parts of northwest Arizona, right, it's very, very red.
When you look, though, the possibility of it happening here, is it as simple as our governor stating someday, we're doing this now, Texas did it, California, Arizona's in, or is there a different process if they wanted to do the redistricting in Arizona?
I think it would be difficult, the way things are now, for our legislature to redraw the congressional districts, especially on the kind of timeline that's happening in Texas or California. It's a couple reasons for that. First of all, because our independent redistricting is in the state constitution, you would need to give something to voters to put in place either a process or the districts that was some kind of constitutional referendum that have to pass out of our legislature. California and Texas, their legislatures themselves are dominated by one party and the other. Whereas in Arizona, our legislatures are actually, our two houses are very narrowly held themselves.
So not very likely that something like that could happen here.
Not likely at all, I don't think.
So after the next census, it's anticipated we may gain more seats than that. Then we'll start the process over.
That's
They'll
right.
draw the map, and we will see districts that will look different than they do right now.
That's right. Every 10 years, at least under our Constitution, we actually reset the districts and start from scratch to rebuild them.
I always appreciate the expertise because this has been such a big topic of conversation that there's cheating going on by one party or the other. But it's good to know in Arizona it's an independent commission, and there's probably not much going to change until the next census.
I think that's true. And actually, if you want to know more, we actually have the Clean Elections Commission. We started a podcast. It's called Beyond the Ballot AZ. You can get it on all your platforms. And we are, for this episode coming up that people can download right now, we have a national expert, law professor, who talks us through all the different ins and outs of this process.
Always appreciate it. We'll be back. Every Sunday here on Broomhead, we ask a new poll question we'd like you to participate in. This week's question is, do you think ASU football will win the Big 12 championship this year? All you have to do is head over to cw7az.com/Broomhead to respond to the poll question. Thank you for joining us this week. We'll see you next Sunday on Broomhead.